Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. Just got back from Lakers practice where the vibes were, we'll say, interesting. We will get into it in a second. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack with today and just how things are trending right now. I would say not great. It's not been a great start to the season for the Lakers. Not much to update on the injury front. Not really much to take away from the comments today, although there was one comment that is now making the rounds that we will have to unpack a bit. But shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you all. Shout out to Will, Boji, Sarah, Michael, Rock, Connor, Danica. Appreciate you guys. So before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out Young Lido. Shout out Creo. All right, let's get into 3 takeaways from today's practice. So takeaway number 1, injury updates. Again, not much to update. Status quo for basically every player. The only update is Marcus Smart is dealing with flu-like symptoms right now and stayed home from practice. So he was not in the building today. He did not participate. So that is another mini setback, and we'll see how long he has to deal with this and how long he's kept out of practice. JJ didn't give us a timeline, and obviously when you're dealing with a cold or flu, whatever, that can fluctuate in terms of your availability. I did get to ask about Adu Thero because JJ had not mentioned him yesterday when he was running through the injury or the injuries and the injured players, and he confirmed, as I had reported yesterday on the show and had heard from someone, that Adu is a modified participant, so he is essentially a limited participant. That's their positive spin on the term limited, is modified participant. So he's not participating in live action right now. He's doing individual skill drills to the side, similar to LeBron and Luka right now. And no changes for Luka, LeBron, or Gabe, which means Luka and LeBron were limited participants today. They did not partake in the live action, and Gabe Vincent partook in most of practice, but wasn't a participant in every part of it. So no real changes there outside of Marcus, and then some clarity on Adu. Second thing that I think we have to touch on is the Deandre Ayton comments that are now going around. And so Deandre said essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here, I'm going to quote him. He said, "I haven't," when asked about getting pick and roll reps with LeBron and Luka. And LeBron has been a limited participant to start camp, but apparently, based on what DeAndre said, he said he's not gotten reps with Luka, though that conflicts with what JJ said last week, not specifically to Luka and Ayton, but Luka had been a participant in practice, according to JJ last week. Jake LaRavia had also spoken to that. Several other guys, I haven't gone through all of my notes or my previous tweets, but there had been talk about Luka and scrimmaging and different stuff. We had seen clips from Lakers social, so I don't know if something got lost in translation here or what. Maybe they haven't specifically worked on pick and roll drills, or when they have worked on pick and roll drills, Luka hasn't been a participant in that, and maybe it's been guys like Gabe and Marcus was limited last week as well, so maybe it's Gabe and Bronny and Jake, Austin. I don't know who's doing these drills or how much drilling they've done with the 2-man game with the bigs and the guards with pick and roll, but that was certainly an eyebrow raising comment. And again, I don't know if what's the truth here, and I'm now excited for tomorrow's practice to get to grill JJ on this a bit and just get some more clarity as to what's going on here, because it was, I don't want to overreact to it, and I think it's probably a nothing burger where maybe they haven't specifically worked on drilling or this in practice with Luka and Ayton. But again, based on some of the stuff that we heard last week, it sounded like they had done some of those things. So I don't know where things stand with this right now. But to kind of spin off of that, the vibes just were not great, as I said earlier. And I feel like I've been covering the NBA since 2011. I've been to a couple of those years were COVID, but I've probably been to now, I don't know, 12, 13 training camps, something like that. And you could just tell when the vibes are good and when the vibes are bad. And I don't want to say the vibes are bad because I don't think the vibes are bad right now. I do think there's a little frustration simmering. I think there's a little tension simmering with this whole situation of not having everyone available. And I don't think it's specific toward any player, toward any party. To be clear, I don't think there's like a scapegoat here. I don't think anyone's at fault. I just think that the situation is collectively frustrating where the Lakers are. I mean, they have the TV up saying, championship habits, championship communication, championship shape. That was the mantra. That's the mantra of the season. That was the mantra leading into camp. There was all this excitement with JJ and Rob at Media Day, with the players at Media Day. And then it has just been every day something else. And even today, like no positive developments with the players who were limited yesterday. It was actually a negative development with Marcus Smart now being sick and being held out of practice. So it's just been, I think, a frustrating process overall for the Lakers. And it's easy to sit on the sidelines or be on the sidelines at practice and say like, this should be happening or this should be happening. This guy shouldn't be sitting out. This guy should be playing. I think in an ideal world, of course, everyone who can physically play is playing. I will give some level of grace for the guys who are actually dealing with stuff. And it sounds like to varying degrees. I mean, Marcus has an Achilles situation. You got to be really careful with Achilles situations. As someone who's torn their Achilles, I have some empathy for that. Adu has had this knee situation dating back to March when he had surgery. And it sounds like the swelling has been on and off for a while. So that's another situation. He was held out of Summer League. Like that one, okay. LeBron, about to be 41, year 23, nerve, glute situation, okay. The Luka one's a little bit trickier because he did play in Eurobasket and he did play deep into the offseason, but they have not attributed an injury to him, that they have not designated anything. So as of right now, it seems JJ jokingly or said load management, then he kind of took it back yesterday. But if Luka isn't playing in practice, that is a form of load management, depending on, we could debate semantics, but that is some form of load management. Gabe, that's an ongoing knee thing, but it sounds like he's been participating more than previously. And then Maxey, that's another one where he tweaked his quad. So I guess I think a lot of these things are legitimate, but I think that's more so where it's just this cumulative collective of guys just are picking up injuries and not being able to participate. And the Lakers have just not been able to get a clear picture of what this group looks like. And it does feel like there's going to be a real impact where they do have several days leading into Sunday's game. So we'll see if, Gabe played obviously in the second preseason game. It's going from last week's comments, which feels like things are changing every day. Like Marcus was supposed to play this week. Maxey was supposed to play this week. Adu was supposed to play this week. So there's still a few days for these guys to get right and for this to trend in a more positive direction. But I think a lot of like the good vibes that were coming out of the first 2-3 days of camp into what the team actually looked like in the preseason, which I think was depending anywhere from mildly disappointing to very disappointing, depending on how harsh you want to be with their performance. Like Phoenix and Golden State just were both better and sharper, and they played more of their regular guys. And it was just not a great start to the preseason for the Lakers. But I think the hope was their guys would get healthy. They'd be able to participate more this week. And that just hasn't happened. So I think it's way too early to sound any alarm bells or make any grand declarations on anything. I don't think it's time to overreact, but I do think it's time to properly react. And it's just undeniable that there's an opportunity cost here. The Lakers are losing opportunities to practice and develop continuity and chemistry and go through like JJ was talking about today. They were installing double horns actions, and he was saying one side of the floor was players running it offensively. One side of the floor was players defending that against a group of players running it offensively. And then they ended up having different teams go against each other and guard it, and whoever scored or got the stop would stay on. And based on what he's saying, like LeBron wasn't part of that. Luka wasn't part of that. Marcus Smart wasn't even there today. Adu was not part of that. Maxey wasn't part of that. So it's like that's a lot of guys that you are missing, that those are valuable reps of 2-man actions, 3-man actions, defending those actions. Like that's just a lot of stuff that they're missing out on. So again, I think in these situations, we're quick to put the blame on one particular party, and it's the front office, or it's the coaching staff, or it's the players, or it's the medical staff, or like I think everyone deserves some slice of the blame pie. But I think the bigger thing is like there just seems to be a collective frustration from JJ and some of the players who are at least talking to us with like, we want to see what this looks like. And for a variety of reasons, whether it's being overcautious or guys are legitimately picking up things that are keeping them off of the floor, like whatever it is, it's affecting things. And I think if things trend positively over the rest of the week, then maybe the tune will change and guys will be in better spirits. But like right now, I think there's been real frustration from people where it's just like, we want to see what this looks like. And unfortunately, we're missing out on valuable reps to get there, because it's not just that, like the games are important in and of themselves. And I think the Lakers need to take the preseason more seriously moving forward for like the rest of the preseason. But you only get so many practices, and during like once October 21st rolls around and the season starts, they're going to only practice maybe once a week on average. Like you just don't practice that much during the course of the NBA season. So these are really valuable times that you cannot simulate with LeBron and Luka on the sideline. You cannot simulate with talking through it. You can't simulate with watching it on film. Like DeAndre Ayton was saying, he's been the film, player development has been sending him clips of Luka and LeBron in the pick and roll for him to study. And that's nice. I think like that is the next best thing if you can't get on the court and do those reps. But the best thing for DeAndre Ayton to do as a finisher and as a screener and figuring out the timing and the rhythm with Luka and LeBron is to get reps with Luka and LeBron. And it's almost like a tango. Like you got to get those reps together. Otherwise, you're going into, and even if it's like they only play in a couple preseason games, but they're not practicing, I still don't think that's good enough. I think you need the practices, multiple practices, and you need multiple games going into opening night. But whether that's going to happen or not, as of right now, it's TBD. It's just a giant TBD with the Lakers and the rest of the preseason and training camp. And then final takeaway before we get into the Q&A here. One thing I noticed on the court, and I don't know how I didn't notice this because it's been there the entire training camp, is the Lakers have this arc inside the three-point arc that goes from about the dunker spot through the elbows, around kind of the free throw arc, and then circles back. And there are different interpretations of what that's supposed to mean. My initial view of it was that it was probably like the mid-range zone or long two zone that JJ doesn't want them shooting, right? Like, so going back a couple years ago, Darvin had the blue squares, which were the points that they wanted guys to space out to. And that was something he learned from Milwaukee. And coaches will implement different things in training camp to kind of just visually show the players where they want them to be or what they want them to do. And we know JJ is a very analytics driven coach and big on shot quality and points per possession and all that stuff. And he's clearly not a mid-range guy in terms of the way he wants the offense to operate. And it's interesting because the Lakers have some guys, Ayton, Rui, Austin, Luka, LeBron, like they can all operate in the mid-range and are effective from there. But clearly that's not a point of emphasis for the offense. It's get to the rim or shoot threes. So I wonder if that's part of it. I noticed it after JJ spoke, so I didn't get to ask him about it. But in talking to a couple of the other people, someone mentioned defense as a potential thing of maybe that's the zone you want to force the offense into, which the Lakers were good at that for stretches last year in terms of forcing mid-range jumpers. And then I'll actually give, I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this, but I saw Pete Zayas just texted me and was responding to that, and he thinks it's more of a decision zone offensively, where when you're on a drive and you kind of take that first dribble or two, making a decision of shoot, dribble, or pass out of like in that zone of right inside the arc. So I'm interested to hear what JJ says about it. I don't think he had it last year, but it is on all four. Or I think every half court has that line, so that's a new thing that they implemented. That I just thought from like a basketball standpoint, like it was interesting to see that. No one else had noticed about it yet. No one had asked about it yet. So that's on my to-do list for tomorrow, is to figure out why they have that line and what they're trying to accomplish with that. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. See, we got a few new members: Boji, Connor, Will. Thank you guys for becoming members. Creo says, I don't understand this Eurobasket excuse because Jokic and Şengün have been playing preseason games, and unless Luka's nursing an injury, why is he not participating in practice? It's a fair retort. I wonder if they are potentially just not disclosing that he's dealing with something, because again, JJ was asked if Luka was dealing with something yesterday, and he said load management, and then I think Brad Turner of the LA Times was like, that's you shouldn't use that term or something. He was kind of joking around, like pushing back on him a little bit, and JJ was like, I'm being sarcastic. So that was a non-answer to the question of, is Luka dealing with something? I guess again, it could just be rest, and that's just how the Lakers are approaching it. Like, I think in general, they need to take this time more seriously than they are. And I'm not going to criticize or put that on Luka, but I just think in general, like, the guys who can play probably should be playing. And maybe because they had such a long week of practice, Luka is going to be a full participant tomorrow, and maybe he'll be a full participant on Saturday, and then he'll go into Lakers are off Friday. Then he'll go into Sunday's game ready to play, and they just gave him a couple days off. If that's the case, then that's the case. But I do think they are missing some valuable reps right now in practice and just overall continuity with this group. Mistra says, I will say that I would rather have this extended wait than a LeBron injury. Not saying that would necessarily happen, but if the strategy is to lower the injury risk, I get it. Well, with LeBron, they're claiming he's actually injured and dealing with this irritation in his glute. So LeBron has an injury designation, and at his age and with his workload, I think if there is anyone who deserves some rest or a bit of load management, it is LeBron. I've said that before, but I think also with it, like, I mean, Sham said yesterday, he reported on ESPN that LeBron is likely going to miss the entire preseason. So I would not set my expectations for LeBron to play at any point during the preseason, but hopefully he could get some practices in. I think, again, like, you want games and practices ideally. If you have to pick between the two, I think I'd rather prioritize games, but clearly that is not the case right now. So I would at least like for him to get a couple practices going into opening night. Danica says, been a pretty stressful preseason so far. Yeah, I mean, it felt like there was a real shift with yesterday's practice. I felt JJ was a little bit testier. Then today it was also kind of just not the same, like, happy vibes. Like, I felt like last week there was just this optimism and this just kind of energy and spirit that was with some of the questions and just talking through some of the things. And there was just like this I don't know, just this general excitement with the group. And it feels like that's been tampered down. And DeAndre Ayton, I thought, I mean, you guys could watch it. I think Lakers Nation posted his availability. Like, I thought he was a little ornery and a little testy with us. And he was kind of testy with his media availability last week. So he had like two really positive media availabilities with us, with his intro and then media day. And then I feel like since then it's been a little testier. So I don't know. I want to not overreact to this, because I would like, if Luka practices the rest of the week and everyone comes back and maybe it's just LeBron out Sunday and the Lakers beat the Warriors with both teams relatively at full strength, I think on Monday we're going to be having a different perspective on all this, but all we have to go off of is the comments we've heard so far, who's played, who hasn't, who's been available, who hasn't, the first couple preseason games. And I would say if we are judging the first like week and a half here of opening training camp, first couple preseason games, I would say this has not gone the way that the Lakers have wanted it to go. And it's not really trending in a direction of them having the requisite reps and experience together entering opening night, which is important to get off to a good start, which I think you really need to do in the West. So like long term, I don't think this has a real impact necessarily. Like it could, I'm not saying it can't, it could. I think this is more of a short term impact. But the issue with that is that can lead to a longer term impact of like, if the Lakers start 4-4 instead of 6-2, it doesn't sound like a lot, but come game 80, 81, 82, that could be the difference between the 4 seed and like the 7 seed. So every game's going to matter in the West. I think there's 9 or 10 teams that could push for upwards of high 40s to even 50 wins. And the Lakers are really going to need to set a certain tone and get off to a certain start to start the season. And it's just, I'm growing a little bit more skeptical that that's going to happen. Darren Adams says this is very much disappointing. 100% agreed. That's, I think, the most concise way to put it. Sarah says, what time does the media availability come immediately after practice? Yes. So, and a whole other thing has been like the timing, or they keep telling us to show up at 12 or by 12, and then we don't get in there until like 12:45, 1. So they've been running really over with some of these availabilities. But typically, like the practice ends, they open up the doors, and then by the time we get in there, a lot of times, like at least so far this season, Luka's been gone, LeBron's been gone. We're not, several guys are gone. They're either going to get treatment or they're leaving or whatever, getting ready to leave. But then the guys who are there, we will watch them go through some form of shooting drills. So we've seen Rui going through shooting drills, Dalton, Maxi Kleba, Marcus Smart, Austin. And sometimes they'll do like individual stuff like Austin. It's been one-on-one work against a player development defender. But Bronny, Vando, I'm trying to, it's been most of the team we've seen going through, like Ayton as well. But I'm thinking more like later into the availability. But yeah, that's how it works is we enter, the second practice is like officially over. Most of the players try to dip. Some guys will get some extra work in, and then we request earlier in the day certain players to speak to, and then we find out right before practice who we're talking to. We actually were supposed to talk to Luka today, and then that ended up falling through. Creo says, I see that they want to take things slow and don't care that much, and I don't care that much about the preseason, but then I don't want to hear shit like we didn't have enough time to gel or practice together later in the season. That's my thing, and that's, I think sometimes there's these built-in excuses that they have for certain things. Like the other excuse that has driven me crazy over the last few years has been they make a midseason trade and then that gives them carte blanche to use that as an excuse for why they underperformed the rest of the season. And going back to 2023, they overperformed, I would argue, making the conference finals with that group. Or maybe properly performed, however you want to view that. But then it was, we made the big trade, so now we just got to run it back and stand pat and have continuity and go into next season. And then that season it was, Vando got hurt, Christian Wood got hurt, Jackson got hurt, and there was a sense of like, well, we didn't have our full roster, so they didn't make a move, but it was. We didn't have everybody, so that's an excuse. Then this past season, it was, well, we made the Luka trade, so we only had everybody for 20 games, and we got to see what it looks. It's just there's always some sort of excuse either behind a trade or behind the injuries, and I just think at some point, like you got to get past that, right? It's got to be about how can we overcome this hurdle that we have, rather than using it as a justification for why we underperformed. Roberto said, McMenamin said Thero would be cleared this week. How likely does that look? It's a good question. I had just heard yesterday, as I said on my live then, that there was no update on Thero other than he was a limited participant. JJ said as much again today. So there was that report. I believe JJ co-signed that report when asked about Thero last week, saying he was expected to return this week. We're now halfway through the week and he has not returned. So I expressed some skepticism last week about the Thero report and said, like, how many times have we had a Laker dealing with knee swelling that does not come back anywhere close to the projected timeline? So I'm not going to say that's the way this is going to go, but we are halfway through the week and he's still a limited participant. So unless if he does not return by tomorrow, that would, for me, put a little bit of doubt going into Sunday, though they will have one more opportunity to practice on Saturday. So we'll see. Jay Spares, thank you for the super chat. Kind of new getting back into the NBA. It feels like there's always some damn mystery with this team. Are all organizations like this? I like JJ, but honestly, his act is exhausting. I think because the Lakers are, I would say, America's team and like the most popular sports team, or the most popular NBA team, but they're one of the most popular sports teams in America, one of the most popular sports teams globally. There's just always this extra attention and intrigue and palace intrigue, I think, with the Lakers and how things are being run and how things are operating and just what's going on. So I think that's a big part of this. So I would say not all organizations are like this. And they do, especially the last few years, I think have done a really good job of keeping things internal. And there are pros and cons to that. But one of the cons, I think, is that sometimes the explanations or information for certain things does not come out or comes out much later. And then it allows certain narratives to build and certain things to kind of take on a life of their own. So again, like they're free to operate however they want. And I think you can look at an organization like an OKC, a San Antonio, a Miami, like those organizations have often been very insular themselves, and they have had track records of success in that style working, where there's also been organizations more like the Warriors who are much more of an open book and much more media friendly and a lot more information disseminates. And there are pros and cons with that. So I think that plays into all this. With JJ, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to really comment on that. Like I like JJ. I think he is smart. I think he's a good coach. I think he means well. I think he's in a tough situation with a lot of these injuries. And I don't, especially with Luka and LeBron, I think with the other guys, you can maybe put more of it on the medical staff and the coaching staff to some extent. But with Luka and LeBron, like we know just how the NBA operates. Superstars run the show to a large extent. So, I mean, even JJ's public comments about the situation have been like, it's out of my control with whether LeBron's going to play in the preseason. So that seems to indicate that it's being run by whether it's LeBron or Mike Mancias or Clutch or some combination of all three. Like the LeBron part is out of JJ's hands to some extent. And with Luka, I would assume with how the Lakers have been empowering him as the face of the franchise, that he and his medical people have some say as to his participation as well. So to some of it, I think you could maybe put on JJ or the coaching staff being a little overcautious, medical staff, whatever. But some of this is also out of his control. And I think specifically with Luka and LeBron, I do not think JJ is dictating, fair or not, like what they are doing to the extent that he can with the other players. King Dynasty said, just got here. What was discussed over the last 30 minutes? Really just the injury updates, and the vibes have not been great. And I think there's some general frustration with the lack of availability for a lot of players, but that's the main stuff. Thomas, worried about the starting group's defense. Braun, Luka will guard front court players, which causes Austin and Rui to have to guard guards. Two starting power forwards that can't defend the perimeter is concerning. Yes, I mean, you are making the point for why I've been anti-Rui starting since this has become a discussion. And even yesterday, I forgot to touch on this in yesterday's live, but we spoke with Rui, and Rui was asked, actually, the first question of his presser was, which position, like you've been used in multiple ways defensively, which position or which player archetype do you prefer to defend? And he said 3s and 4s, but then he specified, and said, more so power forwards. And then he started saying like he likes being able to match up physically with power forwards. And I think that's been his best position over, like we've seen him defend guys like Randall and Kat and even Jokic and have some success in stretches against those guys. And when Rui is like banging in the post and being physical and like locked in on a simple assignment, I think he can thrive defensively. When it becomes a little bit too much having to make quick decisions and reads and having to make quick twitch movements on the perimeter, I think that's where some of his limitations come in. So even Rui was basically making the case of like, I'm a power forward defensively, and you can't really have, like, I was just listening to the Low Post episode with Zach Lowe and John Hollinger. They're going through several rosters and they're talking about Dallas and their collection of size. They're talking about Houston and their collection of size. I think there's one more team. I think Phoenix and their collection of size, and some of the limitations with those teams defensively, because most of their players are 3s, 4s, and 5s, or 4s and 5s, depending on the team they're talking about. I think it's the same issue here. Luka, LeBron, and Rui are all best at defending 4s. That is the like if you are building a lineup around each one of those guys to slot them in, they are all best at defending 4s. With Rui, I would say more on ball. With LeBron and Luka, off of the ball. That just limits how you build a defense. And this group is going to score whether it's Vando as the 5th guy, whether it's Rui as the 5th guy, Marcus Smart as the 5th guy, whether it's Bronny as the 5th guy. This lineup is going to, like, the starting lineup is going to be good. It's going to score. The issue is, can it defend? And that's where I think it with the new information we have of where Vando's at, I think it should be a conversation between Smart and Vando. Though again, I think things are trending toward Rui starting. Cisco Lee, I'm worried we still haven't addressed the fix for bench scoring, weakness from last year. I come at this from a different perspective because I think bench scoring is a little bit overrated. And I think you do not want to only have 5 players you trust. You don't want to have only 5 players that can score, right? And those guys all start. So I'm not saying it's not important at all. I think there's a degree of nuance, that there's a gray area here between it's very important and it's not important. I'm more in the middle. I probably lean more on the side of like not important, but I think it is something the Lakers need to address. This is also another reason why I think Rui makes more sense off the bench, and he can be more of an impact scorer off the bench and be in certain lineups with Luka and Jackson Hayes and kind of build out. Like, I like that trio together, and I think there are ways to get Rui going in bench lineups. But yeah, I mean, it like, unless you're moving Rui or Austin to the bench, but they're just not moving Austin to the bench. We can retire that conversation. It just, there's a limitation there, unless Dalton gets promoted. But right now, Dalton has not had a good summer league, has not had a good start to the preseason, and I don't think has done himself any favors in terms of getting promoted in the rotation right now. So I think it's going to kind of come down to, does Rui start? Does Rui not start? And then if he doesn't start, can any of the Banshees overachieve? And can we see some shooting like from Gabe that we just saw? Can Jake LaRavia do more? Maybe Vando chips in a little. Like I don't think you should rely on that. In defense of the genre, says these vibes are not the best, but at least they're not the flipper situation. Yeah, and I want to be clear. I don't think there are bad vibes right now. I think there's been a vibe shift. That's more so my point. Like, I would say the vibes were much better last week than they've been this week. Doesn't mean they're bad. I just think they've been a little weird. There's been a little tension, a little frustration. HT says, based on your logic, clearly the best starting lineup is LeBron, Luka, DA, Smart, Vando. With Luka, DA, and LeBron, you'll have no issues scoring. Agree 100%. The framework in which I was discussing the starting group was with Austin as the 4th lock, because I will repeat this, and I've said this 100 times, like, Austin is going to start. It is going to be Austin, Luka, LeBron, and Ayton, and the competition right now is for the 5th spot. And I don't even know how much of a competition it is, because I think right now it's going to be Rui, but that is what the starting lineup is going to be. So my point with those 4, that quartet together, I think the 5th guy does not matter as much. The exception here is kind of Vando, because with Smart and Laravia and Rui, you get a certain level of shooting and spacing, just like a floor with those guys, where Vando does not provide that. I like his shots look better in practice. It has not looked much better in games. He is 1 for 6 on threes. And if you watch the film, teams are still not guarding him. So until that changes, like Vando is a negative on the Lakers spacing and on their overall. So he's the one guy that, like, you know, I was joking earlier. I think he's the one guy that does pose some complications, but I still think there are ways to use him offensively that, because the other 4 guys are so good, you can probably still be a good enough, like a pretty good offense. And then he's going to raise your defensive floor and ceiling with his play. I still like Smart better as a starter because I don't think you have to face the same offensive complications. And he's just several degrees better as a shooter and offensive contributor. And we have proof of concept with Smart. He has started and closed games for good teams in big moments. Vando has not done that. We have the 2023 stretch, but even the 2023 stretch, he did not close a lot of those games in the playoffs. He progressively played less in each series. So I have more confidence and faith in Smart to hold his own offensively, but I think it should be one of those two. Excuse me. David L says Vando is better on ball D versus small guards. Compared to Smart, he probably is. I actually wonder if Smart is better against wings and Vando's better against guards, and that might just be what it is. But to this point, the Lakers probably need, I've said they need backcourt defense. So Vando would, like, I'm coming around to Vando being the answer, especially if Smart is injured or just not available during the preseason. Like, the best availability is being available, and Vando is available, and Vando's played well. I do wonder what the offense looks like against good teams, and I still contend none of the other West contenders or just contenders overall start a perimeter player as limited offensively as Vando, but just because of the Lakers roster build, that might just have to be what they do. Arnaud de Capo, thank you for the super chat. If LeBron is too old to practice and build chemistry, I think it's not a bad idea to move him and move on to build around Luka fully. The issue with this is that LeBron has a no trade clause. So LeBron is in not complete control. I mean, he's in complete control whether he gets traded or not. I was saying not in complete control just because, of course, he can't just say, like, I'm getting traded here, and that's gonna, like, the Lakers have to acquiesce his demand and the other team has to sign off on it. So there are other parties involved that have some measure of control, right? Like the Lakers, he could say, I want to go to Cleveland, I want to go to Golden State, I want to go to Dallas, I want to go wherever, but the Lakers have to ultimately sign off on that package. It's just a matter of the Lakers can't just ship him out and trade him anywhere. Like, he has to sign off on that. So he does have the most power in the situation. He can pick what team he wants to go to and what package he is willing to accept, right? Like, you could have a situation where maybe it is Cleveland and Cleveland is sending out Garland and Allen, right? And that's really decimating the top end of that roster. And LeBron could be like, no, I don't want to be a part of this trade if that's what's going to cost. I want, DeAndre Hunter in there instead of one of those two. And I want to play with that, one of those players plus Mobley plus Mitchell. So he has the most control in the situation because of the no trade clause. But of course, again, the Lakers have the power to ultimately decide if they want to do a trade, and then the other team has to be okay with, they have to want LeBron and be okay with whatever that cost is going to be. So I don't think we're anywhere close to this, and with LeBron, again, like, it's tough to say, but if they're reporting he has an injury, then I'm going to take that at face value. I think there's some other stuff that we have less clarity on that I'm a little bit more skeptical of, but not with LeBron. I'm just saying in general. But if he's dealing with an injury, he's dealing with an injury. I don't think it's fair to hold that against him. But yeah, I mean, I think this is more of an off-season conversation, right? Of like where things go next summer. Brian Farmer, minus Anthony Davis, what player from the 2020 Lakers team do you wish could be added to the current Lakers roster? 100% Alex Caruso. I think Alex Caruso would check a lot of the boxes of what this team needs. I think he would be an ideal fit starter next to Austin and Luka and bridge the gap between those two guys. He could defend. I mean, we saw him guard Jokic. He can also defend point of attack. He can guard wings. I think he would be an upgrade over Smart and Vando and properly slot the entire rotation of like if there was a world in which you added, I think the ideal version of this team probably features a trade with Gabe and or Maxey and Dalton plus something to go get another player that's a starter. And then if you have Rui, Smart, and Vando all coming off the bench, I think all three of those guys are more high-level bench players. And then you add like another starter that's better than them. I think that's really the way that you're optimizing this roster and giving them a real shot to win a title. So like if you just flipped, and I'd have to do the math, and obviously OKC is not going to do this, but if it was like a Gabe for Caruso or something like that, all of a sudden you slot him in as the fifth starter. He's going to be on a bit of a minutes restriction because that's how OKC has used him. But then if you have Smart, Vando, and Rui all coming off the bench, that is a really solid top, Laravia as the ninth guy, like top 8, top 9, that I think can compete with just about anybody. Rock Official says, if Jake plays better defense than Rui, I would start him at the 3 and put Braun at the 4. I've thought about, I made this point yesterday. I think right now my fifth starter rankings would be Smart 1. And this is me. This is me, not the Lakers, not JJ, not the coaching staff. My rankings would be Smart 1, Vando 2, Laravia 3, Rui 4. I think playing more drop coverage and having a greater emphasis and being more selective with the switching and having a greater emphasis on defensive awareness, making quick decisions, and being able to navigate screens. I think Rui grades out the worst of those 4 players by a decent margin. I think Jake has had some lowlights defensively through the first couple of preseason games. In watching his film last year, I don't know if it's a shape, like JJ's mentioned shape a little bit with him and just the team overall. So maybe that's something he's working on. But I think overall, though, Jake is a smarter defender and a more effective defender and a more versatile defender than Rui. So I think it might be relatively close or pretty close. But of course, Smart and Vando are, I think, several notches above both of these guys. But between the two, I do think Jake is the better defender. John says, people clamoring for AR to be traded don't understand the future value of having him on a more expensive contract. Giannis, Jokic not just going to walk in free agency, needs salary to trade. Hope AR stays, though. This is the point I've been making for months, going back to last season, that if I'm the Lakers, the way I play this with Austin is this is an audition season, and I see over 82 games schedule. How does he fit with Luka? And you're supposed to have a full training camp and preseason together, but that's not happening so far. So you have an 82 game season together. How do they fit? I want to know 2-man lineup data, 3-man lineup data with different players, 5-man lineup data with the starters, 5-man lineup data with the closers. I want to evaluate all these things. How is Austin's catch and shoot progressing? How is he playing? What are the different actions we're running with Luka and Austin? How are they holding up defensively together? A lot of variables to sort through. Then the ultimate test, the ultimate decider is the playoffs. And if Austin has another postseason series where he struggles from beyond the arc, similar to Denver and similar to Minnesota, the last 2 series he's played in, then that's a big factor in the long-term viability, in my opinion, of Luka and Austin. If he bounces back and shoots more like he did in 2023 and more like he has in the past few regular seasons, then I think that answers that question, and the Lakers probably advance and maybe go on a deeper playoff run. Then, regardless, I think they need to retain him as an asset, re-sign him this summer or next summer, and then if things are progressing well and fitting, you keep him and you figure out the rest of the roster and who's going to be that like second star next to Luka. If they're not, you still keep him and then you flip him ahead of the 2027 deadline during that 2026-2027 season. But because of the salary, and he's still going to be a positive value, then all of a sudden you are now in the mix for, you're going to have at least 2 first-round picks to trade. You're, depending on the contracts, could have some guys on expirings or whatever. And if you're coming into a situation with, let's say Dalton like rehabs his value a little bit and is at least like a rotation level player, if you have like Austin, Dalton, and 2 firsts in 2026, 27, I think you're getting into the mix in multiple swaps, and you'll have a couple seconds, and like all of a sudden you can put together a competitive package for that next star who's going to play with Luka. Whereas if you just let Austin walk, or you trade him now for Jonathan Isaac or some of the names, Keon Ellis, like you are selling like to me, this is like I've been making a lot of fantasy football analogies because I'm so into the thick of fantasy football, but this is like having that asset that you know is only going to gain value and selling low on, like, you know, trading one of your players after a poor performance, or just knowing that longer term they're going to have more value. You're selling low. I think right now you're selling incredibly low on Austin because his contract is literally lower. So there's a limitation to the type of player you can get. But he also is about to be a free agent, and that just limits his value because any team trading for Austin has no guarantee he's going to stay. So why would I give a Desmond Bane package for Austin when Austin could just dip next summer? Desmond Bane's under contract for multiple years. So I think the shrewd term, even if you're an Austin doubter, the shrewd thing is to retain him and then flip him later, not flip him now. Cisco says, Jovan, do you think there's some truth to DK's frustration with low touches and missed shots and treated like a Redick shooter? Could see him use more like a Hedo Turkoglu, who's more of a versatile scorer. This is, to me, we can transition this into the report today from Dan Wojcicki of The Athletic that he spoke to a scout coming out of the Palm Desert game, the game against the Suns, where Dalton went 2 for 10, that Dalton is now a negative asset. And for those who have been following and listening to me for a while, I said this coming out of Summer League. I said that I spoke with multiple people at Summer League, agents, front office personnel, scouts, and in surveying them, and when I get together with people at Summer League, I'm asking them questions about the Lakers. I'm asking, how good do you think the Lakers are? What do you think about the job JJ's done? What are their trade assets? Like, how do you view each trade asset, right? And I'm surveying people on their opinions. And of course, it's the opinion of one person, but then when you are talking to multiple people from multiple teams or multiple, repping multiple players away from the Lakers, players with the Lakers, you start to get a bit of a picture, because you can't survey all 30 GMs, all 30 owners, all 100 plus agents. Like, that's impossible, right? But you get a bit of a picture, and you just kind of pick from different points of view, and that starts to put the puzzle together in terms of a player's value and whatever. And there's a lot of negative feedback on Dalton. Like, there's not a lot of like, we're just brushing this off, like we think this is an anomaly. There's a lot of concern here. This dude's 24, which is older for a second year player, and the defense has not progressed. The offense has regressed, although there, some grace for like shooting ups and downs, but he's forcing things. We're not seeing like improving with his decision-making, and like, there's just some concern there. So I said as much going back to mid-July, that I was hearing that he was becoming a neutral to negative asset. This just further, pushes that narrative. And whether that's true or not, I guess we'll see come the trade deadline, ahead of the deadline, if the Lakers can flip him and what that looks like. But right now, I mean, there's not much to be optimistic about. I think even if he shoots well, he's not really contributing in other ways. I think the only other way that I've been slightly encouraged by has been the rebounding. I think the rebounding has been real, and he's been a positive contributor there. But the defense has been, I think, probably the second worst on the team behind just Bronny. Or it's Bronny, Nick Smith, and Dalton are in the competition for who's the worst defender in the rotation right now. I think the shot selection, the actual just shot making, I think he's like 5 for 21 in the preseason, something like that. 3 for 13 on threes. Like, it's just not there right now. And this is a guy who needs to be shooting 40+% to really justify being out there, because he's not doing enough. And to your point about Turkoglu, I see what you mean, because I do think Dalton's more of a scorer than just a shooter. And if you look at his Tennessee film and his prospect profile, he was more of an on-ball guy. And that's an adjustment for anybody, right? Most guys coming out of college were on-ball guys, then they have to adjust to being an off-ball guy. So maybe some of the optimism with his ability to adjust to an off-ball role has been a little, it's a little premature. But the difference I would say here is like Hedo Turkoglu showed a level of passing that I do think Dalton has had some kernels of passing. And like, I think even in the preseason, he's had some nice play, some nice assists and he'll occasionally have a nice pass or two. But like Turkoglu was like you could put the ball in his hands in crunch time, and Turkoglu was hitting big shots, making big plays. So I know you're not saying he's at that level right now. I do think Turkoglu had a better sense of just, like a playmaking instinct that Dalton doesn't quite have. I think Dalton's much more of a scorer than a passer, but I will say he has flashed at times a little bit more of a passing ability than we think. I just think the issue right now is there's so many mouths to feed in this offense that Dalton, I think, is going to be relegated to being primarily an off-ball shooter. And if he can't make those shots and get in a rhythm, then it's just tough to justify playing him because he's not really contributing in other ways. Broke with no money. Thank you for the super chat. I like that. I like the irony there. I watched mine the game, and why don't the Lakers use Vando like Drew screen instead of clearing out? He screens to the dunker. I also believe Vando should start for playmaking in the starting lineup is bad for bench scoring. I would argue like Drew. I get the general point. I would say Drew's been an all-star, and that was partly for the defense, but also for the scoring. Like Drew Holiday, I do not think Drew Holiday and Vando are in the same ballpark offensively. I know Drew isn't like a knockdown shooter, but I would not compare those two offensively. There are some shooting limitations with Drew, but Drew, much higher level scorer, ball handler, passer, just overall offensive threat than Vando. I do not agree with that comparison. I think that the closest comparison that I've made before is Draymond. I think he's much more in the Draymond, and Draymond we've seen can get hot. He could hit. There's several big games. Remember, it got overshadowed because they lost the game. But like game 7, Draymond balled out in 2016. He had, I think, 30 points, 32 points, something like that. Hit a bunch of threes. Like Draymond can do that occasionally. It's not often. But the way to, I talked about this yesterday with Vando and how the Lakers should use him is like using him as a screener and dribble handoff guy when teams are playing off of him, because that allows the shooter or the ball handler to, if Vando can properly create the space and make contact with the defender. I think we saw it a little bit with Gabe in that Golden State first half. All of a sudden, you have Luka or Austin or LeBron catching a ball or in some sort of two-man action with Vando, and they have all this space, and it's either he's smacking their defender and they can pull up, they can step back, they could sidestep, or they could drive. And you have all these options depending on how the defense is going to play it. And you have different counters and you have different ways to roll. Like he can do that, then he can roll, and then you could hit him in the pocket for a cut to the basket. So there's different ways to play that. I think that's the way to do it. I think the slight issue I have with it with the starting group is the Lakers have made it clear they really want to involve DeAndre Ayton. And I think that's for them sort of a way to reward Ayton, because he's not going to get the same level of post ups and pick and pops and just offensive possessions that he did in Portland or in Phoenix. I think he's going to have his role reduced to some degree offensively. And they've made it clear based on the way they've started that they want to involve Ayton in like every screening action. And at the same time, with Vando's out there, you kind of got to you sort of need to involve him. Otherwise, he's just in the corner collecting dust and then teams are ignoring him. So there's a little bit of a balance there where I do think Vando's more of a 5 offensively, and having 2 5s offensively is conflicting, but it's something they're gonna have to figure out. Again, this is why I think Smart should be starting over him. But in terms of starting Vando for the playmaking, the other thing is if you have LeBron, Luka, and Austin out there, Vando's at best going to be the 4th playmaker. And there are, again, situations where you can leverage the dribble handoff, or you hit him, maybe it's a screener action, you hit him in like the short roll, and then he's hitting Ayton or something. And there are ways to leverage that, but I don't like, I think if we're being realistic about it, the ball's going to go through Luka first, LeBron second, and Austin third. And then I think there's going to be a big gap with everybody else, including Vando. Rico, Jovan, question about the team culture. Is our team too nice? No one to speak openly and call out other teammates about level of effort, habits, etc. This is a really interesting question, and I like this question because this is something I talked about last year where it felt like the Lakers were a pretty quiet locker room, and there were times that I wanted to see a little bit more from them in terms of the vocal leadership. And I think Dorian Finney-Smith came in and really changed the culture in late December once they traded for him. I think Marcus Smart is supposed to ideally be that guy for them and be that guy who's going to hold people accountable. He can only do that so much when he hasn't really played with the guys, hasn't really practiced with them, hasn't played in a preseason game with them. So I think there is an element of you have to be out there and in the battle to be able to for your voice not to ring a little hollow. But I think in general, this is a team on the quieter side. They do not have a lot of the Draymond, Dylan Brooks, Pat Bev type. I don't think they have a guy like that necessarily. Smart's probably the closest. Of course, LeBron is LeBron. He's going to hold guys accountable. We've seen him hold Austin and Rui and Max Christie and Christian Coloco and different guys accountable through the last few years. And he's done that his whole career. He's a natural born leader. I think with Luka, we're seeing a jump. He had the team event last night with the Porsche racing. And for him, I think he's a little bit more quiet, laid back, but of course, entering a situation, halfway through the season, he was a vocal leader last year to an extent, but this has now been the passing of the torch. It's Luka's team. He's the face of the franchise. And I think he's set that tone with the way that he's run things and setting up, I think, more leadership stuff. And it's just been a little bit of a shift with that. So I do think in general, this group is on the more quiet side. And JJ talked about that last season. They brought back a lot of the same guys. I don't see Ayton or Laravia being particularly outspoken. So I do think at times the leadership's got to be, it's going to be a lot of JJ, LeBron, Luka. I think Austin's spreading his wings a little bit, being more vocal, but Smart is the other guy who I think those are the primary voices right now. Rock Official asked if I watched the new Mind the Game pod. No, I've seen a couple clips from it, but I'm not caught up on it yet. I did watch the Old Man and the Three pod with Austin and Jake. I enjoyed that. Broke with no money. Thank you again for the super chat. This is a follow-up. He said, no, I mean the scheme. Oftentimes teams would put the worst defender on Drew because scoring limitations. So he would screen and roll to the paint with PG on him. Now you got PG in the paint, then not going to contest shots at the rim. That is, I like the follow-up. I like the clarification. And I think there are ways to do that more with, by PG, you're saying point guard. The one thing that has to change then with Vando, if they are going to do more of this, this is where I think this to some extent is the argument for Rui starting, because most teams do not have the defensive personnel to put a big wing on Luka, a big wing on LeBron, and a big wing on Austin, and then also put another big wing on Rui. So we've seen this at times over the last couple of years with Rui, even when they had D'Lo in place of Luka, where Rui's just going to be lower on the pecking order. If to put yourself in the opponent's shoes, you are first trying to take away Luka, then you are trying to take away LeBron, then you're trying to take away Austin, then you're trying to take away Rui. And if it was the same thing with D'Lo, it would be, it was more so LeBron and AD, but you would just put a center on AD. Then it would be Austin, then it would be D'Lo, then it would be Rui. So I think if we're talking about finding ways to exploit teams putting smaller players on Vando and exploiting that, the limitation I see here is Vando has regressed as a finisher for 5 straight seasons. He has been on a downward slope as a finisher to the point where last season there would be times, if you go back and watch the film, he'd grab an offensive rebound, have a putback opportunity, kick it back out. He would catch the ball in the short roll, catch the ball in a roll, have an opportunity to go to the basket, immediately kick the ball out. He had blinders on to not shoot it in and around the basket. And I've made the Ben Simmons comparison a little bit. Like it was not quite at that level, but it was Ben Simmons-ish. There was some shades of that I think he needs to show that now. Like he needs to show he can punish teams for putting small guys on him. Like if he plays the way he did last year, you could put a point guard on him, and I don't think he's going to take that guy in the post and get a deep seal and get a foul or score on that guy. That's not what he was doing. The Vando we've seen in the first 2 preseason games, though, I will give him his flowers. Like he has looked more comfortable finishing around the basket, getting to the rim, attacking the rim off the dribble. So he's looked more like that 2023 guy. And if he could get back to being that guy full time, and this isn't just a flash in the pan, this isn't just a preseason thing, that's a different conversation. But I would say so far, especially the last 2 seasons, the Vando we have seen is not a guy who can punish smaller defenders, is not a guy who's comfortable around the basket. He's just not. And I think so far in the preseason, he's looked more comfortable, but I want to see more reps with that. I don't want to just go off 2 games that Luka, LeBron, and Austin didn't play in, or Austin played in one of them. Roberto says, Luka's Slovenia teammates talked about he was more vocal and took more of a leadership role during Eurobasket. Yeah, that was a storyline coming out of that. So it seems like Luka is becoming more of a leader and has realized that's a part of his game. And I don't have good enough insight on how he was in Dallas. I know Dallas fans and Luka fans have defended his previous leadership. So I'm not going to comment or speculate. Like, I think just being around him, you can tell he's more of a quiet, mild-mannered guy, and he's more of a chill guy, and that's fine. But at least from what I witnessed last year and what I have heard, like I've gotten the feedback that he is being more vocal, and I think that's a positive development. Step back, fam. Jovan, question. Do you feel like LeBron James is going to be ready for opening night versus the Warriors? Plus, do you think he's going to play a lot of regular season games this year? I do think LeBron is going to be available for opening night. I think it's sounding like he's going to miss the entire preseason, though, which is unfortunate. It is an opportunity cost there. There's just reps that the Lakers can't get back later in the season. In terms of the regular season plan, I think they're going to be more cautious with him, but I don't know if that's more in what I know about LeBron and talking to him through the years about load management and injury stuff. He hates missing games. He hates sitting out games. He is anti-load management. So I don't think he's going to try to sit out back-to-backs or 3 and 4 nights or whatever. I could potentially see a reduction in minutes and maybe he's down to 32, 31, 30 minutes instead of 34, 35. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that adds up over the course of a season. So I could see maybe a reduction in minutes or a slight reduction in workload. But for now, I'm operating under the assumption he will be ready for opening night and he's going to try to play in every game he physically can this season. But it seems to be a different approach this year than previous seasons. So this is also something that I think is evolving, and maybe this glute irritation doesn't get better and maybe he does sit out parts of the beginning of the season. But as of now, the indications have been trending toward him playing and ramping up to play. But again, we still have almost 2 weeks until opening night. So I think a lot could change between now and then. Broke with No Money follows up again. Thank you for the super chat. When you watch Mind the Game pod, it would make more sense, but Drew did layups down there, and if there was a defender on the backside, he would kick out for 3. Got it. Okay, so I will check it out, and I will check out what you were saying. I still will posit that I think Drew's a much better offensive player, a much better finisher, and a much better passer overall than Vando. But again, I think Draymond is a closer comparison, but I do think there are ways to leverage. Like Vando was a guard growing up and a ball handler growing up before his growth spurt. So similar to, we've seen like a guy like AD was a point guard before he had his growth spurt. There are guys who grow up playing point guard and have certain instincts, and then it evolves as they grow into them being more of a wing or a big. I think that's what happened with Vando, but he still has some of that. And I think the playmaking, like he had 4 assists against the Warriors. I thought the passing was pretty good. Cisco says Vando starting sets tone, energy on defense. Energy could be contagious to Lakers group, could fix the third quarter star. Rui did say it's about who plays the most minutes for Vando, play low. Like I will say that like I do anticipate if even if Vando starts, I don't know if he's going to play more than Smart and or Rui. I think Rui's going to play more than Vando, whether he starts or comes off the bench. I just think there's going to be a limitation. Like maybe Vando's a 22 to 24 minute a night starter. I don't see Vando cracking 30 minutes unless there's an injury. Again, I've referenced this 7 billion times, but last year he played more than 20 minutes in 6 of 36 games. And in all 6 games, there was a front court starter out. So I think, and I said this yesterday, and I will repeat this for those who missed it, but JJ was asked about Vando, 2 questions about Vando after the Warriors game. One of them, he started with a compliment, and then he drifted into, but the big thing with him is the shot. That is going to ultimately determine, like the viability, like the success, I'm paraphrasing, but he immediately went to the shot unprompted. He was not asked about Vando's shot, and he transitioned from praising Vando into basically being like, the big thing here is going to be, can he shoot at a reasonable level? And so far the early returns are no, but we'll see how that materializes. Then he was asked a follow-up about Vando being in the mix for the starting role, and he did his same thing again where he says, well, last year's starters started 8 games, then we made a change, then we had 24 starting groups, and then he said, of course he's in consideration, like, of course. But it was very non-committal, and it was very, like, not really much of an endorsement, in my opinion, just from knowing JJ, having a good sense of his answers. So I do want to pump the brakes a little bit. I think the fan base is a little bit more optimistic or encouraged by Vando's play and his potential role than the coaching staff is. So I want to be honest and transparent about that. Like, I think some people are like, he's going to start and play 30 minutes. And I'm just like, I don't even think he's going to start, but if he does start, I still think it'll be in a relatively limited role. So I want to pump the brakes a little bit on that. But as I've said, I am coming more around to him starting. I still think Smart is probably the best of both worlds, but he's not even playing right now. So, again, you got to be available. Broken No Money follows up again. I'm not saying he's as good as Drew. I think it makes him startable because off the bench, Vando is not better good, then it brings more depth off the bench. I mean, that's another argument in Vando's favor in terms of like you're balancing the starting group and the bench. Because right now, I think the other issue, if you start Rui, your 5 best offensive players are all starting. And I would contend, if we're saying 6 through 10 is then Gabe, Marcus, Jake, Vando, and Jackson. If the starting 5 is the 4 plus Rui, then that's the 6 through 10. You can make a case 5 of your top 6 defenders, 5 of your top 7 defenders at worst, are coming off the bench. So it's like you have this complete imbalance with the lineups where all the good offensive players are starting, all the good defensive players are coming off the bench, and you have a mismatch in both regards. And now you're like putting together, you're trying to patch it together in the middle portions of the game of, okay, now we need a defender to come in for LeBron, and then we need a defender to come in for Austin. But then we got to be careful that we don't put too much defense and not enough offense. And like you're trying to patch this all together over the course of the game. Whereas I think if you just start it with a little bit more balance in both regards, it's a more natural flow that you're not piecing it together as much, in my opinion. Roberto does say, and I also agree with this, artificially creating depth by starting, throwing pens all over the place. Artificially creating depth by starting worse players doesn't actually make your team any deeper. I think, so I agree with the depth part. I think for me, it's more about balance of, I think they need a fifth starter to ideally be a defender. And that's why I think it's between Smart and Vando. I will continue to beat the drum that I think Smart balances. Like you got Rui with the offense and questionable defense. You got Vando with the defense and questionable offense. I think you got Smart with the defense, but far less questions than like a degree of questionable offense for sure. But he's a much more proven offensive contributor than Vando is. Like he's a guy who's averaged 4+ assists multiple seasons. He's had 1 league average shooting season, but he's typically around league average on threes. And if you actually look at his catch and shoot numbers are typically good. It's the pull-up threes where he just takes too many of them. Ideally, the Lakers can take that part of his game and put it in the cupboard and never open that cupboard, and he just doesn't take any more pull-up threes. But so again, I've said this before. I think the answer is really not on the roster, but among the options, I think Smart's the best. Zachary Thomas, thank you for the super chat. I think Ayton is our game changer. As long as we don't let Rudy Gobert have a 25 and 20 game against us, we will be fine. I think Ayton is to me, he's the most fourth most important player on the team behind the big three. I think Luka has to be at an MVP level. LeBron has to be at an all-NBA level. I think Austin has to produce at a fringe all-star, high level starter level. And if you get those three things, the next guy who comes into the mix, in my opinion, is Ayton. And it's like, can Ayton be can he be an above average starting center and even like a top 10 starting center? I think he has that track record. He's going to be in that mix, but if he's clearly a top 10 center, like that changes the way I think this team's ceiling is, right? Like I just think their ceiling is that much higher. A-Dub says, not saying that I think Austin should come off the bench, just saying it's the same line of thinking. I assume you're talking about the balance with the group. I think the issue that I see with Austin coming out, there's several issues, but I will go back to Roberto's point of like moving someone to the bench doesn't mean your team is deeper. It's just you're kind of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, right? The issue for me with Austin coming off the bench is it's more of a talent issue where I think there is a big gap between whoever you start over Austin and Austin from a talent and production standpoint. And it's also hard not to, if you could show, like if you could build me a rotation right now and maybe use the Cranjis, he's got his rotation map, and you go through the rotation and you show me a rotation where Austin is coming off the bench and still playing 34 minutes a night and it makes sense, then, I think that is like the closest thing to your answer for those who want him to come off the bench. I think it's very hard to build a rotation with Austin coming off the bench where you are not also limiting his minutes to like 26 minutes a night, 27, 28. And I think that 6 to 8 minute difference in Austin playing, whether it's Smart playing more or Gabe playing more or Laravia playing more or whoever's playing more, that player, especially in the backcourt, because Austin is a guard and he's technically like the only, if we go with the projected starters, he's the real only guard defender in that starting five. If Austin's playing less at the expense of a Smart or a Gabe or a Laravia, I just do not think any of those guys are close to as good as Austin. And now I think you have a talent problem where you're just playing worse players more minutes. And I don't think this team has the depth or the talent or the skill to offset that. Like if this team had all this depth and all these guys who were as good as Austin or in the same ballpark as Austin, that's a different conversation. I've said if they had prime San Antonio Danny Green, sure, start that guy and bring him off the bench in a 6-man role. If they even had a KCP type from the 2020 team, a Caruso type, you could sell me on some version of Austin coming off the bench and there being like a talent similarity between Austin and another high-level two-way guy. The Lakers don't have that player on this roster. So unless they make a trade and that changes that, that's one thing. But whether it's Smart, whether it's Vando, whether it's Laravia, like you are playing a player who is just objectively a worse player to some extent, more minutes, and I think you are reducing your team's floor and ceiling. So that's my piece on that. Matthew Wilson says, JJ is trying to use DK similar to Duncan. Horn screen actions don't work with DK. He does not run off of ball screens with urgency. Defenses trap him with the ball and makes him pick up, dribble, off catch. I agree with this. I think this is a good observation for Matthew. I've been enjoying your questions lately. You do ask a lot of high-level basketball questions. Again, to go back to Dalton, I think he's more of a scorer than a off-ball shooter. I think we've even seen like the off-ball stuff hasn't worked as well with him as it did earlier in the season. I think it's more just the spot up catch and shoot. Like he's still a really good spot up catch and shoot guy. And although the shot hasn't been what it was earlier in last season, but yeah, I mean, they got to figure it out. And if they don't, then he's just not going to play. Sky Falcon 5 says, if we want to see if Luka and Austin works long-term, you start both and see how the minutes go. What's the point of splitting their minutes and committing big money long-term to Austin? I mean, that's the other thing is that if you think, I think there's just like with Austin, I think that there's just a giant miscalculation of how good he is and how good he is relative to the rest of the roster. But also, like, if you're advocating for Austin to come off the bench, then are you advocating for him not to close? Because if he's coming off the bench, but still closing, like, you still have the same concerns or issues that you are arguing are the reason he should be coming off the bench. So, like, if anything, that would, I think if you want to make more of a case, I think you could make more of a case of, like, does he fit in the closing lineup? Then does he fit in the starting lineup? But I think he fits in both. And again, I don't think the Lakers have the requisite supporting talent to move him to a bench role. If they had, again, I don't want to keep listing out the players, but if they had a certain caliber of 2A guy, I think it's a different conversation. I don't think they have that player. Brian Farmer, will Giannis become available at the trade deadline? Well, he kind of gave us an indication that it will be in 6 to 7 months. So I don't know if you guys saw. So Shams had the report yesterday about Giannis and his future and that if he were to entertain a trade, the Knicks were the preferred destination. Giannis was asked about it today at practice and said he's not on social media. He's tuning out all the noise. He's focused on this team. He believes on this team. But then he said, but in 6 to 7 months, if I change my mind, I'm human and like that stuff happens. And like, I am not going to be held to this. So it's like, it was kind of funny that like he gave a non-committal committal or a temporary committal to Milwaukee. And if you actually just look at the timeline, 6 to 7 months would basically be like, oh, Milwaukee loses in round 1 and immediately Giannis asks out. And it's like the LeBron situation where walking off the floor in 2010, that's probably the last time LeBron is going to be a Cleveland Cavalier or there's some at least serious doubt that he's going to stay in Cleveland. I think that's going to be the same. That's the way this is headed. Now, does it happen at the trade deadline? I think it depends where Milwaukee's at. I think I'm lower on Milwaukee than I think most people are. I think they're probably going to be I think their ceiling is probably a 5 seed, and that's like best case scenario. I think they're more likely going to be on that play-in border and either a 6 seed or maybe even a 7 or 8 seed and potentially in the play-in. So if they get off to a rough start, maybe he asks for a trade at some point between December and February. The kernels are out there. The seeds are out there. The signs are out there. I think it's a matter of time. Is it the trade deadline or is it next summer? I think it's probably going to be next summer, but there's a possibility he's available. It does seem like, though, at least what's been out there is he's pushing for New York. I don't know how that deal works. New York has traded a lot of its assets. It would have to be more of a player-driven trade, or maybe they do a 3-team trade where a player's going elsewhere and then some assets are being rerouted to Milwaukee. But it's unclear what direction Milwaukee would want to go in. And remember, they stretched Dame to get Miles Turner and to try to be competitive this season. I just think if you look at the roster, it's just not very good. And if we're talking about like their second best players, either Miles Turner, Kyle Kuzma, Gary Trent, or Kevin Porter, like, I mean, yeah, it's just not good. So I think it's a matter of time. Cole says, I heard 6-7. Bacano says he's tired of the Giannis teasing and this wishy-washy stuff. Yeah, I just wanted to ask for a trade, but I get it. It's tough. Rico, Jovan Ayton sounded kind of annoyed / irritated today in interviews. Did you feel that in person or just came off differently on camera? No, I felt that in person. I actually think he came off better on camera than it came off in person. He was very, I used the term ornery earlier. He was very defensive. And I would say, I noticed this the last availability he did, like the first training camp one he did. He's almost, and I get it because he's been a punching bag for so long and people have been so critical of him. And he's constantly battling this perception that like he's been stamped with a certain, certain labels, certain perceptions of who he is and how he is and all this stuff that he has to fight that to some degree. So I get the human element of it, but my read has been he has come off pretty defensive the last couple of availabilities, and it has almost been like he's kind of looking for someone to ask the wrong question to kind of snap at them or to like put them in their place to like defend his honor or like defend his reputation. So I thought today was worse than last week, but it still was kind of like every question he was a little snippy. He was getting a little snippier, and it was very like, I'll say, like, as someone who's been there, like I try to ask basketball questions. That's always the way I come at this. Is like today I asked JJ about drop coverage and what they're working on and sort of the learning curve with that. And I always come at it from like a basketball perspective, or at least that's what I try to do, to come here and inform you guys what they're trying to do, what they're talking about, you know, what we learn from practice or games or whatever. But it felt like, I felt like it was a lot of softball questions and he just was not having it. And, you know, he was asked about the chemistry with Luka and LeBron. And it's like, then he's just like, I haven't. And you know, that kind of goes off a little bit on that. And it was just like, he was very snippy today. So I don't know, it could just be in a bad mood, could be whatever, but I felt he's almost been like looking for a reason to get upset with a question. And that's just something I've observed. Cole says Ayton trending to Russ territory. No, I don't think anyone's going to touch Russ. Rip Van Winkle, Buha clip farming. I'm assuming this was with the 6'7". Jello says sassy Ayton. Yeah, let's say it's sassy. We'll go with sassy. Nicholas says, I think he's not annoyed, just anxious because he hasn't got to be spoon-fed by Luka or Bron yet. That's certainly possible. David Parks. I know this sounds, is this the David Parks from X? If so, what up? I know this sounds stupid, but Hayes is a better fit with Luka for lobs and speed, but of course Ayton should still start. I agree with you. I think specifically there are very few players who are better than Jackson in the specific context of screen, roll, catch lob, dunk / finish. And even I think he progressed and has shown like an ability to pass in the short roll, or even maybe he catches the ball, comes down with it, doesn't have a dunk opportunity, and then he can kick the ball out. So David Parks says not from X. So it's different David Parks, but good question or good observation here. I like it. The issue, of course, is, you know, to the second point, is like Ayton's just a better player. He's going to start. He came here to start. So, but in that specific thing, I agree that Jackson, like that's his best NBA skill right now. Iman says Ayton will be fine. Yeah, 100%. I agree. I think Ayton, I've been encouraged by Ayton. I've really liked his first couple games. I'm going to go 5 more minutes till 1:30, and then we will get out of here. Miss Optimist, thank you for the super chat. For the guy who wanted to move LeBron because he couldn't practice and build around Luka, the guy didn't notice Luka couldn't practice either. I think we got to be careful here. I know that there's a lot of tension right now within the fan base and who's not practicing, and it does feel like there's a little bit of LeBron Luka tension within certain segments of the fan base, and I get it, but those two guys, I give them most grace. I think everybody else, I wonder just where they're at physically and whether they can play or not. But again, I think this is just a general state of the Lakers right now. It's more like there's just general frustration of like this group just isn't healthy and can't play together right now. So that's I think my biggest observation of all. Roberto says the Luka needing screening lob threat, big Gafford-esque big is overdone in my opinion, because that's all he basically ever had in Dallas sans KP and Wood. That's a good point, and that's a point that if you guys remember, I've had Iztok Franco on a couple times, and he is the Luka whisperer. He's the Luka expert. He's covered him since he was in high school and all through his professional playing career. So he actually, on this show, had suggested DeAndre Ayton and Marcus Smart as two guys that he thought would fit really well with Luka. And specifically with Ayton, he was saying that he feels like Luka needs a big who can punish mismatches and not just fit in the pick and roll game, but also be able to attack smaller defenders. And if they're going to switch those actions, be able, like, remember, that was the way that Minnesota canceled Jackson offensively, was they just switched the Luka Jackson pick and roll, and the Lakers were not going to post up Jackson or have him do, like, or if you guys can remember Jackson's hook shots, we've seen some Jackson hook shots, and they're not very aesthetically pleasing, we'll say. So I think Ayton is a big step up in that regard, and that is an area where he's going to fit really well with Luka. David Park says that Wiggins trade idea doesn't look so bad after watching the preseason. It is a lot of assets to give up, but I think it's worth it. I think if there's any way you could keep the first out of it and just do Rui, Dalton plus something else, I would do it in a heartbeat. I'm seeing some Bill Belichick commentary. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Pablo Torre strikes again. It's the summer 2025 is the year of Pablo. Sky Falcon says, I don't know if I could handle both Wiggins and Ayton. They both have some low motor games. Yeah, that would be a potential risk or downside here for sure. A-Dub says, Jackson's hook shot might be broken, but at least he still has nice hair. He does have nice hair. I thought Jackson has done his role through the first couple games. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I appreciate you guys for rocking with me for the past hour and a half. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. On the road to 50,000 subscribers by the end of the calendar year. So if you are watching and have not yet subscribed, I'd appreciate if you did so. Also, consider joining our Discord channel. I've been way more active in there, giving you guys updates before practice. For those in there, I was talking about Luka was supposed to talk, then he canceled, and I was talking through who was going to be talking and giving some updates on the vibes and stuff. So if you want some of that insight live before I'm even going live on here or recording an episode, make sure you check out the Discord, and then also check out channel memberships, which just launched last week. And then for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow with an episode of Buha's Block. I'm in between. I mean, there's not been much to talk about, so I might just post a mailbag prompt. If you guys got a mailbag question, drop it in the comments below, and just do mailbag : the question. I will also be posting in the YouTube section, the community section. I'll do a post that says reply to this if you have a mailbag, but I'll probably do a mailbag tomorrow because there's just not much else to talk about. But appreciate you guys. Shout out to the Late Night Gang, and I will talk to you all very soon.